I had put so much heart and soul into things with, my four core low side of two. I tried so hard to like help make the forum a better place. As I had told people, there was history, and I did not know all of it at the time. But a lot of people left because of sexual harassment, other stuff, toxic moderation, whatever, and nobody was valuing or listening to what I was saying, and they kept accusing me of making excuses for myself and misreading me. And then, I think people who disliked me, uh, you know, convinced other people that, like it rubbed off, like they weren't there enough, and those people, like, North Star and other people, like they were just going off one another. And like Adam has admitted numerous times, he never keeps up with things, like that's his problem. He never keeps up with things, so he does not know how things actually are, and he always misattributes my motivations. He's mistyped me EIE. No one agrees I'm EIE anymore but him, other than maybe a few Model G people. But like, I put so much heart and effort, and it just was devalued. People did not know the history. They were too new to the website, and there are so many things I did not know until this whole thing had started. So many things. I had starry eyes for some people, and I just see the good in others. And this even, I initially was even empathetic to North Star as well. But yeah, like, it was unfair, and I got scapegoated at the end of the day. People's mental illness got played by someone who never wanted to do what needed to be done with the forum, and used it as their own social experiment, and for other, desires of like lust and other stuff. And it's just, there's more to that, but there was something else I was going to say, and I forgot it. It had to do with how I was like scapegoated. I know people, like, I talked about how people accused me of making excuses, but like, they kept like misreading me. They kept like attributing false things to myself. They kept pushing typings on me, and I asked, stop. People were not respectful of what I asked. They pushed it on me. That's not cool. And certain toxic behaviors are overlooked the other way in other people that are liked, and that's just how it was. The community has only attracted toxic people. It takes a really toxic person or unhealthy person, one or the other, or both, to be on that forum. Or that's it for them to be on there, because that's the culture of how it has evolved. And maybe that also contributes to why people can't see things as well. Now, I'm certainly unhealthy, and sometimes I could have toxic behaviors, but overall I would not call myself a toxic person, and people misread me. But just the matter that, somebody that said stuff bad enough for the FBI to have involved on the forum, and he was put on site restriction out of personal like, and then I was banned out of bias and being collectively disliked and complained of, like, that just was not fair. And my four core, it's frustrating for me for what others have, and nobody was like valuing what I was saying, and it hurt me, right? But as things had gone on, just more and more info came up, with very detailed ways of suicide, to kill yourself. They were written on their methods, types of ways, and so many individuals on the forum have expressed ideation. You can't have that on there. And in a few years after that thread was made, somebody took their life. I don't know when Pol became a member, but and that was far from the only thread about that, from what I am aware of. It was really toxic, and so many people are gonna want to blame me and the individuals, you know, that were not transparent with things. But this has been allowed to happen for decades. Who knows if, you know, there is another suicide from a user named Newborn Star, you know, that could have happened too. You know, like, there's so much stuff that's there, and people never bother to do their research. Hell, most people, you know, did not know. No one knew certain things, you know. Yeah, I did not, you know, other people, until it came up. There was just so much. And people would just get the wrong ideas of things, and people were unfair. That's the fundamental thing here, you know. People were not willing to listen, you know. They accused me of making excuses. I diagnosed the problem of the forum, why people left, and why, you know, it made me a quote-unquote so-called spammer to begin with. Because for 3 years, when I had been on the forum, no one ever had called my posting style as spam, and actually quite a few people had that posting style. Clark has that posting style, you know. It's just that so many people left because of how the forum was, that with so few people and so few evenly distributed time zones, it just made me look like I do it. And my executive dysfunction, you know, people wouldn't listen to me. They wanted to say it's an excuse. People said, oh, mods are like making, you know, special accommodations for her, blah 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 blah. But, you know, I didn't even know about the site restriction thing until Subte had told me about it, or he had publicly told people about it. That would have been a way more reasonable thing to do for myself than perma-ban me, when you had people who had sexually harassed users that are still present on the forum and not there. You know, you had the guy that got FBI involved on the forum. He's still site restricted there to this day only. There was just so much wrong. People might not realize it, but they looked the other way, or they fixated on people, certain people they dislike or whatever. But the forum was a very toxic place, and it brought out the worst in other people. And it was kind of like a design where people were destined to get frustrated with one another, with, you know, the inattentiveness and things being ignored, and just over decades of time, the culture that set in there. I mean, it's just how it was, and people don't see the full picture of it, and people are still probably not even going to listen to me because they didn't care about me or value my view, you know. And I'm not toxic for, you know, not wanting psychotherapy as it is, because most psychotherapy is not designed for my needs. Something like primal therapy would be, and I want that. It's just that the only place that it exists where I live is in Venice Beach, and it's done in person, because primal therapy you cannot do remotely. It's not that I'm not open to help, you know. It's that I'm just picky about what type of help I want that aligns with my own ideals. This is why I really am not an attachment Enneagram core. You know, like a phobic 6 would just go with it and attach to the system of psychotherapy. A counterphobic 6 would be rebelling against it and rejecting all forms of therapy, whereas I just am frustrated with it. It's not that I reject. I don't have that all or nothing view of psychotherapy. I just see certain types of therapy would be better for me that meet my own ideals, and the fact that I have ideals is related to being a frustration emotional type. emanating from my emotional processing, you know. It doesn't have as much to do with other forms. It's something the Enneagram and limbic system measures. But people just haven't had any care or compassion for me. Like, do people even realize, like, what I've had to deal with in the past, like, year? You know, like, people gave me the fucking hardest time. And, like, yeah, like, I did have a breakdown. Like, I aged out of a program where I was having mental health help with a mental health coordinator who would come with me, and she made me attend groups, she made me volunteer at a wellness center, she got me active and moving. I have a hard time doing that on my own. And you know, I got moved like in 8 placements in the past year, a little over a year, 8 placements. You know, I dealt with crap from my parents, you know, with them lying to people about the house and to my autism worker. Like, they lied they'd had no money for the hotel when that roommate broke the toilet because I was peeing so much due to Ehlers-Danlos and PTSD. And, you know, the medical neglect of not even having my medical taken seriously to where that was a problem to begin with, that put me in that position. You know, my parents put me in the position to overshare and dump on the forum by how they gaslit me to others and neglected me and abused me and whatever. But, you know, I had Eunice invite that man in the house where, you know, I had no door to the room, and I was concerned I was raped due to waking up with a sore crotch, and I woke up with a message on my phone that wasn't there, and to this day I'll never know if I was raped or if I was not, and I've kind of let it go. But people just had no compassion for me, you know. They did not. It wasn't my fault, you know. Like, you cannot blame me for somebody breaking the toilet and to where I had to, like, go outside in the bathroom on a porch in a bucket for a month or a little over. That's not my fault, you know. You can't blame me. You can't blame me for aging out of a program. Which forced me back into contact with my abusers, my parents. When my mental health precisely started to skyrocket. No, sorry. I'm so tired because of my sleep deprivation, but my mental health just started to, like, dwindle and plummet downward. You know, those things are not my fault. I didn't want to age out. You know, I tried to find another program that was going to take me for a few more years, but it was in LA County, and it didn't have something for me that, you know, was going to work with my autism. So, like, it just really, I was more stable when I was in that group home, even though it was, like, the woman there was not a nice person, and, you know, I've shared that screenshot of what she did to my roommate, have talked about what she did to me with, like, yelling and shaming and the strict organization and the mold neglect, which might even be partially why I have lung problems now. I've been through hell and back, and people were giving me a hard time and pushing me down more also, and people let that happen, you know. There was hardly any moderation, like, on how people were treating me. There was sometimes, you know, like, for instance, like, I reconciled with End, you know, like, I remember Aster did, you know, like, talk to him and set that there, but, you know, like, other stuff, like, they just were able to get away with towards myself, you know, alive, like, bitching and bitching and bitching and bitching and bitching at me and picking on me. And people would think this is a victim complex, but this is not. I'm just telling what has happened. And people want to blame me because they've been conditioned to view me as the problem.